This is a brief summary of the journal article Common Threats and Managing Reputation in Executive Search Firms, which is published by the British Journal of Management and written by William Harvey, Jonathan Beaverstock and Hongqin. It's not well understood how executive search firms manage their reputations when facing common threats. We feel this is an important oversight given that we know that reputation management is vital for organisational survival and success, particularly in executive search and also in professional service firms in general, given the esoteric, elusive, customised and co-produced nature of the sector during times of economic and institutional challenge. This led us to ask the research question, how do firms manage their reputations in response to common threats? We conducted 22 face-to-face interviews with managing or senior partners of executive search firms in Sydney, Australia. We did 2 waves of interviews with elite, mid-tier and boutique firms. In addition, we collected secondary source data, which were analysed from the Executive Grapevine's international directories of executive search firms and the Association of Executive Search Consultants. The data were transcribed and coded following template analysis and a 4-stage procedure. The paper explains how executive search firms can manage their reputations to overcome major threats, and we identify 3 common threats faced by executive search firms. First, one that many firms experienced, which was the global financial crisis at the time. A second one, which was very common to this sector, were questions around its professional status. So, for example, often some of the professionals were referred to as cowboys. The term headhunter was used often in derogatory ways. And third, the proliferation of social media for recruitment, particularly LinkedIn, which was subsuming a lot of work in this particular sector. Our data show 3 forms of reputation management that a lot of these executive search firms adopted. The first is what we term diversifying service offerings, where, for example, they start to offer alternative types of services, for example, around succession planning and leadership development. Second, a lot of these firms started highlighting their symbolic capital, so showing the value not only through their buildings and reports that they were writing and being prominent in the newspapers and on television, and generally just showing their value to both candidates and to their clients. And third, moving beyond just the reputation and status of the firms themselves to thinking about connecting with their clients and candidates through their partners and others. We provide a framework for understanding how professional service firms can manage their reputations in response to common threats. This framework shows how organisations can manage their reputations in response to threats which are common across sectors. And as you can see from the slide, our framework is based on 3 categories from the English idiom, keep up with the Joneses. First, moving away from the Joneses, which is where firms have to start thinking about doing things quite differently to their competitors, and in particular being perceived as being ahead. Second, fencing out the Joneses. This is relevant when some competitors are doing things which are bringing the status of the sector into question, and so fencing out is where organisations really show that the types of practices they're doing are quite distinct ethically and otherwise from their competitors. And finally, networking more than the Joneses is where there's a strong emphasis on engaging both at a network level, but also in terms of thinking about valuable connections and resources that can be exchanged with clients and candidates, which is significantly greater than the competition. Finally, we present a theoretical model of how firms can manage their reputation in response to common threats. So at the top of the diagram, we identify these common threats, and importantly, these are threats not just specific to the sector, but can be common across a number of organisations, like, for example, a financial crisis. And then in the middle of the diagram, we identify different reputation management responses deployed by organisations, which we term symbolic responses, individual responses, and functional responses. And importantly, these are not discrete categories, but have important relationships and interconnections. And then finally, at the bottom of the diagram, we identify common sector responses to reputation management, which I identified in the previous slide as moving away from the Joneses, fencing out the Joneses, and networking more than the Joneses. And this has an important feedback loop to the ability to address and respond to those common threats.